Mm. The bag I packed that night had three things in it: my laptop, a change of clothes, and the last 8 years of my life folded neatly into silence. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a dramatic note. I just set my key on the kitchen counter, next to the coffee mug she'd given me for our third anniversary, and walked out into the cold parking lot of a hospital I visited 100 times before. Except this time, I wasn't there for her shift. I was there because a colleague of mine, a guy named Dennis who worked in the same building as my wife, had sent me a text at 10:47 p.m. that said, "Hey man, is everything okay with you two? I just saw Sarah's car here and thought that was weird." Weird. That was the word he used. I remember staring at that word for a long time before I grabbed my keys. My wife, Sarah, was supposed to be at a continuing education seminar in Hartford. She'd shown me the registration confirmation 3 weeks earlier, had packed a small overnight bag that Friday morning, kissed me on the cheek, and said she'd be back Sunday evening. It was Saturday night. I was at home eating leftover pasta and watching a documentary about deep-sea fish, which tells you everything you need to know about the kind of exciting life I was living. Dennis's text sat on my screen for 4 minutes before I typed back. "Which parking garage?" he told me. "Level 3, near the east stairwell." He'd recognized her car because he'd carpooled with us once to a department holiday party 2 years ago. I drove to St. Aldi Medical Center in 17 minutes. I know exactly how long it took because I watched the clock the entire way, doing that thing your brain does when it's trying to stay calm by focusing on irrelevant numbers. 17 minutes. 41 degrees outside. Level 3. East stairwell. Her car was there. A silver Subaru Outback with a small dent on the rear bumper from a parking lot incident she'd never gotten fixed. It was parked in a corner spot, tucked back from the lights. Next to it was a black Audi A6 that I didn't recognize. I sat in my car for a while. I want to say I felt rage in that moment, the kind that movies show you, jaw clenched, knuckles white on the steering wheel. But honestly, what I felt first was something quieter than that, a deep, settling kind of recognition, like a part of me had been waiting for this, and was almost relieved to finally have something concrete to point to. Sarah and I had been married for 8 years. We met in our late 20s at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. She was finishing her residency. I was managing operations for a mid-sized logistics company. We were different in most of the ways that end up not mattering, and similar in the ways that do. Or so I thought. We bought a house in Fairfield County. We got a dog, a big, stupid, lovable golden retriever named Biscuit. We talked about kids in the abstract way that couples do when they're not quite ready, but assume they'll get there. Somewhere around year 5, something shifted. I couldn't name it at the time. She started working longer hours, which made sense because she'd gotten a senior position at the hospital. She was quieter at dinner. She'd scroll her phone in bed in a way that felt different from before. More guarded, screen tilted slightly away. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself this was just what long marriages felt like, the natural settling of two people into parallel lives under the same roof. I asked her once, directly, about 6 months before that night in the parking garage. I said, "Are we okay? Not just functionally okay, actually okay?" She put down her fork, looked at me with what I now understand was rehearsed sincerity, and said, "Of course we are. I'm just tired, Daniel. The hospital has been a lot." I believed her. Or maybe I chose to believe her, which is a different thing entirely. I got out of my car. I didn't have a plan. I walked up to the east stairwell entrance and stood there in the cold, hands in my jacket pockets, trying to decide what I was doing. And then the door opened. Sarah came out first. She was wearing the same gray cardigan she'd had on when she left Friday morning, which meant the seminar in Hartford, if it ever existed, was probably something she'd packed for and then never actually attended. She was laughing at something, that low, easy laugh she used to direct at me in our first years together. Behind her was a man I recognized immediately, because his photo was on the hospital's department website. Dr. Marcus Webb, 44 years old, head of cardiology. I knew what he looked like because Sarah had mentioned him casually a few times over the past year. "Marcus thinks we should restructure the scheduling." Marcus made a comment in rounds today that was actually pretty funny, in the way people mention someone they're trying to normalize the existence of. They were holding hands. She saw me at the same time I saw her, and the laugh stopped like someone had cut a wire. For a moment, none of us moved. Then she said, "Daniel." Not surprised. Not exactly. more like someone who has been dreading a specific moment and is now just acknowledging that it has arrived. How long? I said. She glanced at Marcus. He had the decency to look at the ground. Can we not do this here? She said. How long, Sarah? She closed her eyes. A year. Almost a year. I nodded slowly. That was the thing that hit the hardest. Not the infidelity itself in that moment, but the math of it. A year. That meant it had been happening during our anniversary trip to Vermont. During Christmas with her parents. During the Saturday mornings we'd taken Biscuit to the dog park, and she'd held my hand on the walk back. I looked at Marcus. You should know, I said, that I'm going to call your wife tonight. He looked up fast at that. I don't. I'm not. Her name is Christine, I said. She's an orthodontist in Westport. You have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, I believe, 8 and 5. I knew this because the hospital website had a faculty profile with a small personal bio. I'd had 17 minutes in the car and a smartphone. He said nothing. I turned back to Sarah. I'll be at Kevin's tonight. You can have the house until the end of the month. After that, we can figure out the rest through attorneys. She took a step toward me. Daniel, please. Can we just talk? I know this looks, I asked you 6 months ago if we were okay, I said. You told me you were just tired. She stopped. I deserved an honest answer then, I said. I don't need one now. I walked back to my car. I didn't look back. I want to be honest about this part. My hands were shaking the entire time. I was not calm. I was not some composed protagonist walking away in slow motion. I sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes before I trusted myself to drive, staring at the dashboard, doing the math of a life being restructured in real time. Then I drove to my friend Kevin's apartment, woke him up at midnight and sat on his couch while he made terrible instant coffee and didn't ask me to explain anything until I was ready. I called Christine Webb the next morning. I want to be clear about why I did this. Not out of revenge, not to burn everything down on the way out. I called her because she deserved the same information I had been denied. Someone had made a unilateral decision that affected her life, and she had a right to know. She picked up on the second ring. I told her who I was. There was a long pause, and then she said, very quietly, how long? Same question I'd asked, different parking garage. I told her what I knew. She thanked me. Her voice was steady in a way that told me she'd probably had her own suspicions for a while. Her own moments of staring at a tilted phone screen and deciding whether to ask directly. We stayed on the phone for almost an hour. We talked about practical things at first. Lawyers, timing, the logistics of sudden upheaval, and then gradually about less practical things. She told me she'd noticed Marcus growing distant about 14 months ago. I told her about the Vermont trip. She laughed once, a short surprised laugh, not because anything was funny, but because sometimes your body doesn't know what else to do with a certain kind of pain. Before we hung up, she said, I'm sorry this happened to you too. I said, same. Over the following weeks, Sarah and I communicated almost entirely through our attorneys. She'd hired someone out of Stamford. I'd gone with a firm in New Haven that a colleague recommended. The house was an easier division than I expected. We'd bought it together. We'd split it down the middle. No one fought about the furniture except for a brief moment over the dining room table, which had belonged to my grandmother and which I was firm about, and which Sarah ultimately conceded without much argument. Biscuit stayed with me. That was the only part of the negotiation I actually cared about. There was one face-to-face conversation, about 3 weeks in, that I want to tell you about because it was the moment I understood something important. Sarah had asked to meet for coffee. Neutral ground. A place near the courthouse. I agreed, because there were a few remaining practical details to sort out, and I thought doing it in person would be faster than the back and forth of attorney emails. She arrived looking tired in a way that was different from her normal tired. She sat down and wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and for a moment said nothing. Then she said, I need you to understand that I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was lonely, Daniel. I felt invisible in our marriage. I'd thought about this conversation in advance. I'd thought about what I would feel. Anger, maybe. Or grief. What I actually felt was something closer to clarity. I hear you saying that, I said. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. You had 8 years to tell me you felt invisible. 8 years of dinners and Sunday mornings and car rides and every single day that I asked how you were doing. You never said invisible. You said tired. You said the hospital was a lot. And when I asked directly if we were okay, you told me yes. She looked at her cup. Loneliness in a marriage is real, I said. I'm not dismissing that. But loneliness, you never try to communicate, isn't your partner's fault. It's a choice. And then going a year without telling the truth? That's not loneliness. That's deciding someone else doesn't deserve the truth. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I think I knew by the time I might have said something that I'd already made a choice I couldn't take back. That was the most honest thing she said to me throughout the entire process. I respected her for saying it. It didn't change anything, but it closed something that needed closing. I hope things work out for you, I said. And I meant it in the way you mean things when you genuinely wish someone well from a significant distance. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Marcus and Christine separated within 2 months of my phone call. Christine had apparently been far better prepared for that conversation than any of them anticipated. She'd moved quickly, decisively, in a way that suggested she'd been doing preliminary research for a while. Christine and I ran into each other once, about 4 months after everything, at a farmer's market in Westport on a Saturday morning. She was buying tomatoes. I was standing nearby with Biscuit, who immediately tried to put his entire face into her grocery bag. She laughed. A real laugh this time, not the short, surprised kind, and crouched down to let him sniff her hand. You must be Biscuit, she said. I've heard about you. We walked around the market for a while. We talked about the things people talk about when they've been through something terrible in parallel. The strange quiet of a newly single household. The process of learning to cook for one person. The odd guilt of enjoying a freedom you didn't ask for but find yourself appreciating anyway. She was sharp and funny and had strong opinions about heirloom tomatoes, which I found unexpectedly charming. She was also clearly still working through her own version of everything, which I respected. We exchanged numbers before we parted ways, not with any particular expectation. Just because when two people have been through the same specific kind of storm, there's a shorthand between them that takes years to build with anyone else, and it seemed wasteful to throw that away. We've had coffee a few times since. Just coffee. She's figuring out her life. I'm figuring out mine. And there's something good about doing that in proximity to someone who doesn't need the whole story explained. I want to tell you about the thing that happened 6 months after the divorce was finalized, because it's the part of this story I think about most. I got an email from Sarah. The subject line said, I wanted you to hear this from me. She was getting remarried. She'd met someone, not Marcus, apparently that had ended relatively quickly, through a colleague. She wanted me to know before I heard it from someone else. I read the email twice. Then I thought about what I wanted to say, typed a response, deleted it, thought about it again, and wrote a new one. It said, thank you for telling me. I hope you're happy. 8 words. I sent it before I could overthink it. And here's the honest truth about what I felt reading that email. Not jealousy, not anger, not the specific kind of sadness I might have expected. What I felt mostly was a quiet confirmation of something I'd been slowly coming to understand over the previous year. The person Sarah described feeling invisible with, that wasn't really me she was describing. That was a version of our marriage she'd constructed in her own mind to make a decision she'd already made feel more justified. The real evidence was in the timeline. A year of deception. A seamless performance during our anniversary trip. The practiced sincerity when I asked directly if we were okay. People who are genuinely lonely in a marriage and genuinely struggling don't usually pull all of that off without a crack. What they usually do is exactly what she never did. Tell the truth when someone who loves them asks, I have a good life now. It looks different than the one I planned, but I've stopped needing it to look the same. I live in a smaller place. A 2-bedroom rental in a town I didn't grow up in. And I found that smaller can mean cleaner, can mean quieter, can mean space to actually hear yourself think. Biscuit has claimed the entire left side of the couch, and I've stopped fighting it. Kevin comes over on Tuesday nights, and we watch whatever documentary I've picked, which he mostly tolerates while on his phone. I run in the mornings, which I didn't used to do, and I find I need it now in a way I can't fully explain. Not for the fitness of it, but for the 40 minutes of just being a body moving through air, with nothing required of me except to keep going. I'm not going to tell you I'm fully healed or that I've processed everything neatly and arrived at some polished version of acceptance. That's not how it works. Some mornings I still feel the weight of 8 years being revised, the way grief has a habit of showing up when you don't expect it. In a song, in the way someone laughs from across a restaurant. In the autumn smell of the air on a Sunday when you're walking a dog and the day feels too much like a different time. But I'm okay. Genuinely okay. Not the rehearsed kind. And I think that's the most important thing I can tell you. Okay isn't nothing, after everything. The parking garage, the phone call, the attorneys, the dining room table, the email with the 8-word reply. Okay is actually quite a lot. Biscuit is snoring next to me as I write this. The coffee is still hot. The documentary I queued up is about ocean currents, which sounds boring and is probably exactly what I need. Life is quieter than it used to be. I think I've decided I don't mind that at all.